Welcome to the Pindown, your Detroit Pistons podcast. I'm Blake Silverman, writer for Detroit Bad Boys, covering everything from the Pistons to the NBA draft and the Motor City Cruise. Our intro sounds a bit different today. Wes has some things going on this week, so I'll be hosting. So everyone just be a little bit light on me so I can get used to everything. But we do have a special episode today because I'm joined by Sean Corp, managing editor of Detroit Bad Boys. Sean, how's it going?
It's going great. Excited to finally get the season going.
Now, 1 second. I normally don't handle the music, so that's why you guys heard it there for a second. But good. I feel like we'd be remiss to start anywhere else in Detroit. I mean, big week for everything. Kind of a big week for the Pistons with media day, training camp getting kicked off, but I feel like we have to start with the Tigers. How tapped in are you? What's your overall take on what's going on in Tiger Town?
I wish I was a little better connected because in the contract dispute between Bally and Xfinity, I lost Bally, and I have not resolved that issue yet. So I've only been living vicariously through the Tigers fans in my life and just feeling the energy.
Oh gosh, I was in the same boat, and then when it was resolved or whatever, I was curious if I was going to get the Tigers or not, because you need to have a certain package, and then it showed up on my TV, but it was a mess, but happy it was resolved. So now that it's on ESPN and everything, are you tapping in at all, or just living through all the internet hype?
I watched a couple innings of each game during work hours. They had a little watch party at work. Yeah. So I'll watch what I can, and I think the next round will be in prime time.
Perfect. So
I will watch what I can for sure.
Yeah, I'm a little lucky. I work from home, so I had it off to the side, and then, I mean, all it did was distract me, but super exciting. And yeah, now that we're getting into the nitty gritty, at least they'll be in prime time. So let's start here. Similarly to the Tigers, who have this young team making this improbable run, a lot of the talk in Pistons land today specifically was about, I believe it was Bleacher Report was predicting wins and records for each team, and they had the Pistons at 24 wins, which is an improvement of 10 wins from last season. And is that a success? Is it not a success? Sean, I know you wrote a great piece on Detroit Bad Boys. Shameless plug. Everyone who hasn't read that already should go check it out. But if they do, in fact, improve by 10 wins, which means they still have only won 24 wins, which means they lost 58, do you think that is an acceptable measure of success for this team?
I mean, I think it's an acceptable expectation to see around a 10-win improvement, considering everything that's gone on in the offseason with coaching change, with personnel changes. If they win more, I will not be surprised, because the context of last year's team was just so bad. But I imagine every bad team tells themselves that every single year. Like, no, we weren't the worst team. It was these 5 things that shouldn't have happened that caused us to be the worst team. So we'll just pencil in 7 more wins. And then we got even better in the offseason, and that's 10 more wins. And, it's easy to talk yourself into that trap. Bad teams are bad, and it takes a while for them to get better. So I think more important for me than the wins and losses, I have 50 existential questions about the Pistons and their future, and being able to answer those questions and minimize the uncertainty going forward is a lot more important than wins and losses for me. So it's what can Cade do? What can Cade not do? What can Cade lead? What can he not lead? What kind of support system does he need on offense? What kind of support system does he need on defense? Can Jaden Ivey be successful without the ball in his hands? Does he need the ball in his hands? Can he be a point guard? Can he be a point guard? Does he have a developing shot? Doesn't he have any hope for a developing shot? You can go on and on with each member of the core and ask these questions. And to the context of last year's team, it was so horrible last year that I don't know if we have the information we need to answer those questions. So this year is about figuring out what the Pistons have, what the Pistons don't have, and what they need so that they can actually chart, some progress going forward.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. And even I mean, before we transition to media day, because you were in the building and got to be in the room for some of the player interviews, talk to some of the guys. Chaz Malibu in the DBB comments asked if this is the year to finally bang the over on wins, and he did caveat this a bit, just based on how things are going right for the Tigers and the Lions. Like, is the universe just flipping the script on the Detroit teams? I think the last over under I saw for the Pistons was around 28.5. I would have to check somewhere again, but do you think they're in that range? And I guess if you were a betting man, would you hit the over or under on that?
Well, I'm definitely not a betting person, so I'll make that caveat right out the top.
Not financial advice.
I would say if I had $5 burning a hole in my pocket and I really wanted to risk it all, I think I would take the over, one, because it's fun, because it's optimistic, and because the Monty Williams of it all last season was so heinous that you just want to think, you want to believe in your heart of hearts that he actively cost a young developing teams legitimate wins. And so if you take that plus some natural progression plus some improvements, like my expectation is between like 24 and 32 wins as a comfort zone for me. So let's just say, hey, let it ride. All $5, Mr. Abraham Lincoln. We'll take the over.
Yeah, I mean, hey, if they're somewhere around there, you don't want to be like rooting for them to lose games at the end just so that hits. So yeah, the fun of it with that. And yeah, now let's transition to media day a bit, because you were there. I mean, I think the big news, maybe the big news for now, is how Trajan Langdon mentioned that Ausar Thompson is still he's out to start training camp. There's no timetable. I believe Ausar said it himself that there's no timeline for him to get back. He's waiting some clearance from the league and whatever the protocol is for, I mean, the pretty serious like blood clotting issue he had. But other than that, we got a ton of quotes heard from all the new players, JB, Trajan, on what's going on. And I feel like it was the first event that sort of drummed up some excitement, and then we're right into training camp, and then we have a preseason game on Sunday. So from your experience there, I guess what stood out to you the most, or what was just your biggest takeaway from the day?
It's easy to get sucked into the narrative of a training camp and quotes and things like that. And, this is not my first rodeo. These things go a pretty typical way. And I think the first one I attended in Detroit was the Maurice Cheeks season, which dates me, but I think that's a good measuring stick for this
you've
franchise.
Seen it all.
Yeah. And, every time the young players talk about how they are excited or how they've developed and how they're leaning on the vets, et cetera, all of that to say, my biggest single takeaway from this year was that I did not reckon with how bad it must have been behind the scenes last year. Mm-hmm. Not because of anything they said outright, but because of the way they talked about being on a team with veterans that wanted to talk to them. Like, that was the framework they set. The veteran players seemed like they actually want to help me be a better basketball player and a better person. It's like, I assumed that was a given, but apparently last year it was maybe a little more toxic than we had accounted for. I think in the Dwayne Casey years, he was very good about setting up a locker room for, we're going to lose a lot of games. We're going to develop. We're not going to be too down on ourselves. We're just going to keep, grinding. But at the same time, he did not implement something that was particularly enthusiastic or groundbreaking. Like, that wasn't his role. That wasn't his system once they pivoted to a rebuild. With Williams, I think the veterans were older. They didn't want to be there. I think Monty Williams was older, well paid, and didn't want to be there, and is stubborn. And he did not prioritize creating the kind of environment that maybe Dwayne Casey did. And they had such huge roster turnover that the veterans that came in at the last third of the season definitely didn't want to be there. And I think this year it's some players made some proactive decisions to sign, their names on a dotted line to come to Detroit for money, for experience, for less pressure, for better family situations, whatever the case may be. They wanted to be in Detroit for whatever their reasons were. And part and parcel of that is, I know I'm signing up to be a veteran on a young team that has these certain responsibilities. And before I say yes to this contract, I'm going to make peace with that. I mean, in talking about and with Tobias Harris on this issue, I think he came here because he was sick of the grind of championship expectations as a third or fourth option that didn't have the ability to, get his team over the top by himself, just like the other players couldn't. I think he wanted to kind of take a step back and be a veteran, mentor, contributor in a positive environment without those kind of oversized expectations. And he's taking that seriously. I think Malik Beasley knows what it takes to develop slowly over time, and he wants to impart that. I think Tim Hardaway Jr. is in that stage of his career, even though he was kind of traded. He didn't make the choice to come, but he's also, sort of coming home. So I think what I heard was veterans that really took seriously their role as contributors who can play and mentors to young players. And from young players, excitement of having players that they can rely on to lead to wins in ways that maybe the previous veterans could not. They were just warm bodies. And also young players who were just excited to win a little more, excited to be around veterans that were invested in them and just want to kind of turn the page on what was obviously a terrible year last year.
That stood out to me too. And Trajan even kind of led with it. I think he was asked about the Tobias Harris signing. And I think the first thing he said was like, well, first he wanted to be here, which says something like maybe he wasn't even high on Trajan's priority list, but the fact that there was interest and discussions and he fit a need that the team had. He has the personality and is at that stage of his career, like you mentioned, who wants to take some of these young guys under their wings and everything. Towards the end of his career, and maybe not as hungry for those championship aspirations like you mentioned, but he's wants to help some of these young guys find their path in the league and really take them under their wing, which I thought was a good thing to do. And I think it was Ron Holland who mentioned that some of those vets were just pulling him aside, asking him to come shoot with them, whatever it is. And some of the guys who were here last year too said that didn't really happen. And how could we know it was like that behind closed doors? Like, we don't know all of what was going on. We could assume that, but we don't know for sure. And I also thought another thing that was cool was how Simone Fontecchio brought up that how he felt really like wanted to be in Detroit. I mean, Troy Weaver traded for him, but he felt wanted by the organization, and he seemed like he wanted to be here too. So I thought that was a pretty common theme as well, and something that stood out nicely. Was there anything else with maybe like the young players, or any maybe like behind the scenes tidbits you got that were like interesting or funny to you, or anything like that?
I mean, there was certainly a looser atmosphere this year than there had been the last couple, and that's you only see what you see, and the way that the Pistons set up media day, you're kind of sequestered. So what you see is
in that
pretty much by
room,
accident. Right? Yeah, what you see is just happenstance. It's not like you're roaming as they're filming all their videos like you did, in years past. But it was loose. And I would say that the other thing I would want to highlight is, again, these players aren't stupid. They know what they're supposed to say and the perspective they're supposed to have when they're talking to media at the start of a season. So take that for what it's worth. But you could imagine a situation where a lot of these young players who, they've invested time, they're used to starting, and they think they're getting better. And so they expect to keep starting. That could be an expectation of Jaden Ivey. That could have been an expectation of Isaiah Stewart. It could have been an expectation of Ausar Thompson or even Simone Fontecchio because he was so great when he joined the squad. But you didn't get a sense that any of them were angling for their starting role. And if they didn't get it, they weren't going to be happy. When they talked about the veterans, they talked about the spacing they provide. They talked about the improvements on the roster. And sort of in an unspoken way, they were kind of, at least in my interpretation, they were penciling in, I don't know if I'm going to start, but I'm going to play. And I'm going to play in a situation that's way more beneficial to helping me use my skills. So you had Jaden Ivey talk about being put in situations where he's allowed to be his best self, and also his experience and enthusiasm with maybe running the offense with the ball in his hands off the bench, although he didn't say off the bench. I mean, we know the scenarios where Jaden Ivey would be running the team on the floor. With Isaiah Stewart, he was a starting power forward. He explicitly said, I put a lot of work into being power forward because that's what was asked of me. And I'm excited this year to play more of the 5 and get down low because that's what I'm best at. And that's what I live for, is fighting for rebounds and banging with other bigs down low. So, I don't think he's going to be the starting center on day one. And therefore he's kind of accepting that reserve role. And then Ausar Thompson just talked about how he can fit in with lots of different lineup combinations as a defender, both on ball and off ball, and also an ability to help the bench unit with the ball in his hands as somebody who can be sort of that secondary playmaker. So, you can understand that they're thinking about how they're going to be used in multiple scenarios that account for the fact that Malik Beasley's here. He's going to play a lot of minutes. Tobias Harris is here. He's going to play the most minutes. And so they're fitting around and fitting in ways that as fans, we would want to see.
Yeah, and I think the lineups are, still one of the biggest talking points we have before we see this new iteration of the Pistons actually play. So we have a YouTube user in the chat. And by the way, for anyone watching live on YouTube or Twitter, feel free to throw some questions in the chat. We definitely have some time and a lot to talk about before the preseason kicks off and after media day, and now that training camp is underway and everything. But YouTube user asked, based on the practice and jersey color theory, has anyone given a clue to the starting lineup Sunday? So Sunday being the first preseason game, I don't know. I feel like it might get junked up a bit just because with the news of Ausar Thompson, it sort of just throws a monkey wrench into everything. Like, I would think that Ausar would start at least in the preseason to give him some run and see how he looks in that first unit, even if his spot was up in the air. But now that he's not with the team, like, who knows what it's going to look like. And I know, I think our guy Laz tweeted about like the blue jerseys and the guys who were in them and who would be starting. I forget exactly who it was. I want to say Malik Beasley was wearing a blue jersey. So do you...
And Jaden Ivey.
So, okay, Cade, Ivey, Beasley, Harris, and Duren, presumably. And maybe that's just preseason, just Ausar. But I think I saw someone else reply that maybe it was just position groups because, like, someone else at the end of the bench, I think, was also wearing a blue jersey. So who knows? But I guess with this Ausar news, and maybe, do you buy into the jersey color theory first and foremost? And who would you guess is starting on Sunday?
I think I gave it a bit of credence only because it sort of conformed with my preseason expectations. So, oh yeah, that's what I expected. So I didn't give it really a second thought. But I mean, obviously Cade's going to start. Obviously Duren is going to get the first crack at starting center. And then obviously Tobias Harris is entrenched just unshakably at power forward because there's not a lot of other options there. So that's 3 positions. You have 2 wild cards. Who plays shooting guard? Who plays small forward? Would they want Ausar's defense on the floor considering the lack of defense otherwise? Maybe, but that we just don't know yet. Because they've spent an entire offseason since the moment Trajan Langdon was hired talking about putting spacing around Cade, does that automatically earmark Beasley as a starter? Sort of in my head, I'm kind of thinking, yes, it does. And so that makes it sort of, who's that other wing? And is it going to be Fontecchio? Is it going to be Jaden Ivey? Is it going to be Ausar Thompson? I don't know until I see it, but I think everything else is pretty well set.
Yeah. And I don't know. I think for preseason, especially, we might see a lot of just JB try a bunch of different things. I mean, I'm sure him and Trajan are working together on like, let's see this 5-man group together at some point. Like, let's see that one. And also I think there's you don't want to push Cade to like 35, 38 minutes in preseason. So we'll see some weird stuff going on, but yeah, Malik Beasley, I feel like is the wild card for me. I mean, he makes sense as a starter. He's started on good teams. He's done well. He's played a lot of minutes. He's put up a lot of threes. I think it's just like, to me, it's always been, is him or Jaden Ivey starting? Like, which one are you going to take out? But now with Ausar out, I mean, maybe you play them alongside each other for that spacing to take a little bit of pressure off Cade and Ivy. Defensively might have some concerns. So I don't know. I wonder if you just see that group play together in preseason, and if you want to give Jaden Ivey more of the run in the second unit, him be that backup point guard, maybe you do just put in Fontecchio for Ivy, or similarly, if you want to start Ivy, you take Beasley out and put in Fontecchio, or he would probably be the only real option. So what's interesting to me about the video that was posted, if that is the starting group, is that Simone Fontecchio is not in there. So what do you think about that? Like, do you think it takes back anything from his role on this team if he is coming off the bench at all?
Well, one, I'm disappointed that they don't seem interested in thinking of him as a starter, because I certainly kind of...
He might be like...
maybe, but in the offseason, I was like, well, pencil him in as a starter. Like, he's perfectly very good at both ends of the floor, and he has size, and he can shoot, and he has a quick release. Like, what more do you need? I don't care if he's not a household name. Like, just use him. I don't know. I guess they might not think that way. They might think of him as like a permanent 6th man off the bench with, lots of shooting and sort of some multi-positional versatility off the bench. So I kind of assume that's where they're leaning. And we also have to account for the fact that this team proactively decided not to address the point guard position off the bench, or I guess, everybody's an incumbent. And other than Cade, nobody really stood out as a quality point guard on the Pistons last year. I don't know if you'd noticed. So I can't imagine that they would have gone into this season saying, okay, we've seen enough. Marcus Sasser is our backup point guard, and there's absolutely nothing else we need to do to address the situation. That scares the hell out of me. So what I sort of imagine is that they said, we have seen enough of Jaden Ivey being successful on the floor as a point guard with the ball in his hands, and we think he can be more successful in a reserve role than he was in a starting role. And so that combination, along with Sasser, along with maybe Ausar Thompson, those are 3 people we like their ball in their hands, and they're going to see a lot of bench minutes when Cade's off the floor. So I sort of think it's Cade, Beasley, question mark, Tobias Harris, Jalen Duren as sort of the one spot is that forward position that they need to address.
Yeah, and I mean the only scenario I can see where they didn't sign a point guard, and if Cade is like the only point guard on the team that the front office believes in, is like the market that was out there, you didn't want to commit to anyone for more than a 1-year deal, and like the Markelle Fultzes of the world don't want to sign a 1-year minimum or whatever it might be. So I mean, maybe there's a trade down the line to address that. But yeah, I agree. I feel like Jaden Ivey is sort of angled into that backup point guard role as it is now, whether it's he starts with the starters and comes out quick and then gets staggered in with the second unit, or just coming off the bench as it is. But speaking of that question mark at the forward position, Dave in the DBB comments brought up Paul Reed, which I think is an interesting name that, I mean, when the Pistons claimed him off waivers, trying to think of how he would fit in on the roster. If you're just laying it out on paper, you still are prioritizing Jalen Duren first and foremost as your big, and then Isaiah Stewart as your backup 5. Like, where does Paul Reed fit in? Some of the players spoke highly of him at media day. I mean, just a guy that competes, has looked great in practice, everything like that. And I think that's something that we could have guessed would happen. He was good in Philly. He was the MVP of the G League 1 year and really like fought to have that role for his team. But Dave brought up the idea of starting Paul Reed as a 4, saying it was a stretch that he starts in that 4 slot, but maybe it shouldn't be. Thinking out loud, is a starting front court of Paul Reed, Isaiah Stewart, and Simone Fontecchio a possibility? He also mentioned this article that Keith Langlois of Pistons.com published just about Paul Reed and how he's performing well and the players are speaking really highly of him. So I'm going to say, like, so one, do you think we could possibly see this trio start? Or do you think this trio would, we'll see many minutes of it together, even if that's like your second unit? Because as I'm putting together even a 10-man rotation, Paul Reed for me is a little bit on the outside looking in, which I don't like. I mean, I think he deserves to play. It's just Duren as your starting big, Stewart as your backup 5, and then if you want to find a few minutes for Ron Holland here and there as your 5th overall pick, like, where I was just struggling to find minutes for Paul Reed, but maybe he is a guy that you do play next to, like an Isaiah Stewart of the world. Where do you see Reed fitting in overall? And do you think he could be a long shot starter on this team in that question mark spot we were just talking about?
I think that there's no combination where Paul Reed starts. Now, I think that the Pistons added a lot of veterans that have played a lot of minutes, and I think they have a lot of young players who are used to a lot of minutes, and those things are not compatible. So somebody and multiple somebodies are bound to be pretty disappointed. I'm going to write a piece on this at some point, but essentially I see Paul Reed as the first player who gets plugged in if a young incumbent disappoints, being either Duren or Stewart. I think they're going to be willing to turn the keys over to Paul Reed in some formal capacity to say, we need you to do X, Y, and Z alongside this other big that we're invested in, and we need to reassess what our relationship is with disappointing big X. Who knows? And then conversely, I feel like Tim Hardaway Jr. is probably the veteran who is going to be on the short end of the stick as far as receiving minutes early in the season. And I don't know if he's going to have an easy pathway to get a steady dose of those. I mean, I view him more as a forward than a guard these days because he's so old. But like Tobias Harris used to be multi-positional, but he's older now. He's not anymore. So he's pretty ensconced at the 4. So then it becomes like, where is that availability on the 2 and 3 to get some backup minutes for some of these veterans? And then Paul Reed is just, I mean, he's probably a backup 4 if you want some shooting, and then backup 5 if the team is really struggling. So, in a best case scenario, he is on the outside looking in, and maybe he gets flipped, or maybe he just fills a role and everybody's, hunky-dory with how things are rolling and the team's winning. But I just don't see how he easily gets on the floor in a way that has dedicated solid rotation time.
Do you think with the news of Ausar and just not having that timetable for when he's going to be back, like, do you think that even opens up a little bit of a more clear, like, rotational role or some minutes for Paul Reed? Or do you think solely based on just like that 5 spot that the majority, if not all, the minutes are going to be taken up by Duren and Stewart?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it would be interesting to know specifically what the new regime's view is of Fontecchio as a power forward compared to a small forward. Because if they're not comfortable with him at his size in a power forward role, then they can sort of mix and match in a few more creative ways to try and get Paul Reed on the floor alongside Isaiah Stewart in different combinations. If they want Fontecchio to play the power forward position, then I don't know where Reed's minutes go, because then you have small forward with Ausar out. You have combinations like Ron Holland. You have Tim Hardaway Jr., who's a veteran that you want to reward with minutes for the time he's put in to kind of help in this young team. You have 3-guard lineups to try and open up more minutes for some younger players like Sasser and Jaden Ivey. So, like, I just don't see how Reed easily fits into the equation when you have so many balls you're juggling and trying to accommodate so many needs.
Yeah, I'm with you there. And I think personally in the offseason, and I think the acquisition of Paul Reed was a great one. I just assume they would have prioritized like a big with a little bit more size and has like rim protection as their elite, maybe not elite, but their NBA skill. And I think that maybe not a lot of those guys became available. Maybe they just didn't want to be here. But I thought Paul Reed was like the best backup big that they could get at that stage. And it seems like he's fitting in well to the locker room. And I just feel like that 5 spot, that's the best case for, I think this was like a Dwayne Casey-ism, but the break glass in case of emergency big that, like, I mean, James Wiseman was at one point.
We don't talk about him.
Yeah. Oh man, I haven't brought up some other like he who shall not be named guys that always get brought up on any Pistons podcast that we do. But I think, I mean, you don't want to assume that injuries are going to happen, but and knock on wood that they don't. But Duren missed time, like Stewart has missed time over the past couple of seasons. A lot of that has been towards the end when maybe guys were getting shut down, but it happens, and your bigs are often like the ones that do have to miss some time, unfortunately. So I think he's a good option to just shuffle in and out as you need. And I mean, especially if like Duren and or Stewart get into early foul trouble too, like Stewart had some of those issues as well. And I mean, that happens with bigs as well. So good guy to shuffle in for foul trouble or injury is whatever comes up on the day or the week that it's going on.
I think also the biggest, I mean, there's so many wild cards on this team, but like, yeah. You know, if I was pressed to pick one huge question mark that I am curious about, and I think that JB Biggerstaff would be highly invested in, is what do you have in Duren? And I think he's going to find out what his answer is pretty quickly. He's either going to be a Durant guy or he's not going to be a Durant guy. And if they pivot to Stewart as a starting five, then, that opens up an all new pathway for Reed, because what that likely also means is that they're kind of deprioritizing Durant or looking to move him to somewhere he fits better, a system he fits better, somebody that could use that size and that sort of athletic ability, if that's not necessarily something that Bickerstaff is willing to accommodate the loss and what he wants out of a defensive five. Now, if he, as a defensive coach and somebody who's worked with big men in a very, a capacity that brings the best out of them, if he can make Durant a defender, then Paul Reed is just a luxury that is that break glass in case of emergency, in case of injury, that gives you the depth you would want. But otherwise, I just don't see it.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think, Jalen Duren and I guess Jaden Ivey too are just like the two biggest stories, I guess, heading into this season. Obviously, like, can Cade take that next step, lead the team to like wins, maybe get an all-star appearance, whatever his next step is. But yeah, Duren and Ivy, being that they'll be extension eligible next summer, you have to figure out what you want to do with that pretty quickly. So, with Duren and the defense, I think that is something that we'll figure out. There's been so much talk around it. I'm with you that they just need to play, and we need to see where he's at, because everything that we've heard is everyone knows that Jalen Duren needs to improve as a defender, improve as a rim protector. And Jalen Duren knows that himself from all the chatter that's around. So that's the biggest thing going into this season for me. But we already touched on this a bit, but I want to shout out our guy Rames in the DBB comments as well, asking about media day and whether there's a new appreciation for what the vets might do for the young guys off the court and from a mentorship and mentality standpoint. We talked about this a bit already, just with how things might have been a little bit worse behind closed doors last year than we might have think, and what we saw and what we've been told. But I guess how I'll adjust that is, do you think this, what's been said about media day and like that looseness that you brought up, do you think it's feasible in the long term? Or do you think if things start off not too hot, maybe hopefully you don't catch a losing streak like you did last year, but you string some losses together, do you think it's just like doable for this whole season, at least, like while this group is together? Or do you see it as something that could easily, if things go wrong, maybe we're not singing the same praises of how loose the guys are?
I mean, I think that last year, the vets last year were probably vets that were, I will lead by example, I will do my job, and therefore I'm going to show the young guys what it takes to be successful. I think this year, the vibe that I got, in very limited interaction was just, no, it's part of my everyday to kind of take these guys and under my wing and show them and push them in certain ways. So I think in that respect, there creates sort of a relationship that's going to be different this year than it was last year. I think also, if there is a big losing streak, this is going to be like 180 from this year to last year, in the sense that I think last year the losing streak probably broke the veterans and totally got them to check out. And because it was like, oh, these young guys stink. This coach doesn't know what he's doing. They don't care to get better. So, whatever, I'm cashing my check and I'm biding my time, and you can trade me or not, whatever. I think this year, if there's a big losing streak, the people on the receiving end are going to be the young players. I think a losing streak equals, all right, it's been cute. We gave you another chance. You showed you couldn't do it. So we're now leaning on the veterans even more, and you're going to have to fight and scrap for what playing time is left. And so if there's going to be tension, I think it's going to become from the young guys who have been gifted minutes that they really hadn't had to earn because there was no competition, as opposed to veterans kind of checking out. Because these are veterans that they brought in that, one, they are good basketball players, better than the previous veterans who have come through Detroit. Two, they're sort of healthy and reliably available in ways that previous veterans weren't. So there's not as easy of an expectation of minutes for young players because so many DNPs were being racked up by those veterans, last year and the year before.
Yeah, and we just talked about Paul Reed. Like, another good thing about bringing someone like him in is it does create that competition, and it's like in a good way. It seems like he's fitting in with the locker room, like Jalen Duren or Isaiah Stewart for that matter aren't like I mean, we don't know what's happening behind closed doors, but it seems like everyone's getting along really well. And even though Paul Reed is someone who could take some minutes from Isaiah Stewart, could take some minutes from Jalen Duren, it's like a healthy sense of competition, which didn't really seem to be the case last year, where if Jalen Duren goes down, if Isaiah Stewart's in foul trouble, then you're just falling back on James Wiseman or Taj Gibson. Like
Jalen Duren, your defense is terrible. We're turning to James Wiseman. That's just not something that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I was just going to say, like, last year, the biggest problem of the millions of problems on the team was that your 5 or 6 best players were probably 22 years old and younger. Mm-hmm. And that's not the case anymore. Tobias Harris is better than all these young guys. I think maybe Paul Reed is better than Jalen Duren in certain respects, and Jalen Duren's going to have to step up his game. Isaiah Stewart is good, but limited. So, he could fit with better veterans around him. And like Malik Beasley is reliable and can shoot. Tim Hardaway Jr. is getting up there, and maybe he can't defend like he used to, but he can shoot. So like there are avenues where if Jalen Duren and Jaden Ivey and Ausar Thompson and Marcus Sasser lose playing time, it's because they were not performing at a high enough level, because there are people better than them or reasonably as good as them that can replace them. And that just wasn't the case last year.
Yeah, that's a good point. Let me ask you this. I'm asking you to make too many predictions. I understand. I'm putting you on the spot, but
I don't care about being wrong.
Yeah,
I've been doing this too long. I'm wrong enough.
Hey, we're all gonna be wrong. So of the young group, and I'm gonna give you these 4 names: Jaden Ivey, Jalen Duren, Ausar Thompson, and Isaiah Stewart. Over under 3.5 of them that will be on the Pistons roster at the end of the season.
I would say over, because I think that there are ways in which all of those players made sense. Like, Troy Weaver was not the world's worst talent evaluator. He was the world's worst team builder and asset manager. Like, he knew how to identify pieces. He didn't know how to fit them together or complement them with things that made sense. So like he just wanted to draft talent and let it sort itself out, because talent rises above circumstance. No, you need like positive circumstance so your talent can grow and develop. So like there are scenarios where Duren's size, rebounding, athleticism, verticality are such huge assets to Cade Cunningham and spacers that he makes perfect sense, even if he's only a marginal defender. Now, he can't be a terrible, terrible defender. If he's terrible, I don't want to like invest long-term in him. But if he can get to, neutral with all those other assets, like that could be a long-term piece. Ausar Thompson is a quintessential wing that you want, provided he can shoot just, like some of those Pelicans projects learned how to shoot. Like, just let him learn how to shoot an acceptable ball, and he's got a starting role in any lineup for a decade. And then like Jaden Ivey's speed is hypothetically a really good complement to Cade's methodical approach, but he needs to learn how to shoot better. He needs to learn how to defend better. He needs to learn how to finish better. And like, you don't want to put all those expectations on a year 2 player, but year 3, you want to see progress that could lead to year 4 progress. So I'm going to say the over because I like these players individually. And I think they finally have players that allow them to fit into lineups that make sense and allow them to use their actual talents to the best of their abilities, as opposed to basically fighting with one arm tied behind their back all the time.
Yeah, I can definitely see those 4, Ausar, Stewart, Duren, and Ivey being on the roster at the end of the season. I guess the only one I could see is if like a contender like Trajan can somehow get a first round pick out of Isaiah Stewart, which would be a big loss, but just how he's talked about asset accumulation and everything like that, like I could see him making a move like that. I don't think Ausar is going to get traded, but I could see Ivy or Duren. I don't know if I think there's really a world where you move off both of them, especially during the season, but there's so much up in the air. Like if it goes wrong for either of them, I think Ivy would be the most likely, just because if you are playing him next to Cade, like, and that's not working out, maybe you move elsewhere. So yeah, I think I'd lean the over too, but I think there are different ways in which we do see a trade with like one of those young guys, because we haven't seen this group play basketball together yet.
And I think it's a good point you make about Stewart, in the fact that if you're going to take the reports as legit that the Pistons were poking around, seeing what they could get for Julius Randle, I mean, in putting 2 and 2 together, you're talking about a Knicks team that was bereft of centers and wanting to get off Randle, who could be an expiring deal because he can opt out. And Isaiah Stewart is a center on a long-term deal that New York could have used, and New York could have offered Detroit's first-round pick, whether they would have actually ended up in a deal like that, yeah. Which they gave up for, a better package. But like, that framework makes a lot of sense. So if that's a framework where Trajan was already kind of exploring some potential opportunity where he was willing to take on shorter term salary, sending out the better player, mileage may vary if you're a really big Julius Randle fan, and getting sort of that draft compensation that Trajan's been, pounding his fist about since he arrived is a key to deals, then, that deal didn't work out with New York, but if another deal came along that was similar, he could swing it with another team and send Stewart out.
Yeah. And the last thing I'll say is like, with all the trades that the Pistons have made, like I am not sure the moves that Weaver made and just like the minor like salary dump deals that Trajan has taken on, like I'm not sure what it's going to take for this team to get a first round pick. Like it seems like the asking price is so high. Like I just won't believe that they're going to add a first round pick in a deal until it actually happens. But I don't know. I could see a contender offering, if they have an extra first, like some sort of protected first for Isaiah Stewart, if they really needed depth in the front court there. So, yeah, I mean, anything on that before we have one more that we'll close it out with?
No, I mean, I think we're in a situation where everybody is on the table in a sense, where nobody has their future confirmed with the Pistons outside Cade Cunningham. So if you want to stick around, you got to show that you're worth that investment. And a couple of these young guys are going to get pretty expensive. So, they got to show it this year, or the franchise is going to make other plans.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I am in the same boat. I mean, I think it'll take a lot to give up Ausar at this point, but I don't think he's necessarily like safe either. But let's close it out with this one. Just looking ahead, this is the last week before we have actual Pistons basketball to talk about before they kick off the preseason. I mean, obviously it doesn't count, but ABW17 in the DBB comments asked what's one specific thing you'll be watching for most intently in the first preseason game. He or she mentioned that for me, it's Jalen Duren's activity and engagement level on the defensive end. I think that's a pretty good one and one of the most intriguing players that you can look for over the whole season. And yeah, also mentioned that just asking Duren to use his long arms to look scary. So, Sean, what, if anything, are you looking to take away from the preseason as a whole and just in general as we have these few games before it actually counts?
I guess, I mean, this is probably a very generic answer that is very typical. Lineup combinations, because this team invested heavily in shooting. They did not invest heavily at all in defense. They hired a defensive-minded coach who has prioritized some quality defense. There are only a couple defensive options within the lineup, and I'm not sure any of them are necessarily penciled into the starting lineup, but we don't know what the plans are. So how much are Langdon and Bickerstaff on the same page about maximizing Cade Cunningham means maximizing the space around Cade Cunningham and putting proof to that theory? Conversely, how much does JB demand defense, and how much can he coach up some young players who have shown to be poor defenders into creating a positive defensive culture? You know, if he is able to turn this team with this talent into a neutral, like 15th ranked defense, I would say this season will be a screaming success, because that would be quite a leap based on what they're coming from and what they've added. Because if they can use this talent to create a 15th ranked defense, we know they also have that shooting. So then, you know, that makes sense that a bunch of people would want to see 28 to 30 wins. That's how that becomes possible. Conversely, if they prioritize shooting, and then great, you might have a 12th ranked offense and a 28th ranked defense. Where does that get you? I don't know. But if it creates the kind of answers to some existential questions about Cade Cunningham, about Jaden Ivey, about Jalen Duren, then you can get your answers and make your plans accordingly with the, you know, slight war chest you have in the offseason, trading away guys you decide won't fit, figuring out how you need to configure this roster long term. So for me, it's like lineup combinations. Are you going to put defenders on the floor or only shooting? And based on which approach you take, what's the threshold of defense you can actually coach your team up to?
Yeah, I was going to say defense too. I mean, the only other thing, I'm interested in the lineups as well. I don't know. I never know if it's going to be, I'm sure it'll be combinations that we see, but I'm like, I just need to see the starting five and the rotations that they throw out on opening night. The only other thing I can think of that was like what my gut told me initially was just see how like Ron Holland looks, because he'll probably get some more minutes than he does in the regular season. So he's talked, and some other people have talked in the training camp quotes we've got, that he thinks he's a good shooter. He knows like he has a good shot. Like, and yeah, we obviously need to see that. So
those empty gyms just create really good shooters.
Yeah, we just need the workout videos. So like, are we going to see that pull through in the in preseason? He's already spent a year shooting at the NBA 3-point line. So that's something, just because I don't know how much playing time he's going to get immediately off the bat. So I think that might be our best look at Holland, and albeit he might not be going up against the best competition, but that's the only other thing. I mean, my question with defense is, being that it's preseason, like how seriously can you take it? Being that what you mentioned, the team added shooting. There are some defenders on the team, but they prioritize shooting. Like if Jalen Duren goes out there and we're seeing some of the same defensive mistakes that we want him to work on, like, are you concerned, or do you just throw it away because it's preseason?
No, I would be concerned.
Yeah.
Because it's time for him to show what he can be as a starting big man defender in the NBA, and he needs to show it to his head coach right away. There is no grace period for him, and so he needs to take seriously this opportunity in the preseason to cement his role as the team's starting center. Like, I want him to be worried that defensive lapses equal less playing time, equal my role is at risk. That doesn't mean he's always going to be successful, but you know, he has the size, the athleticism. Maybe he doesn't have the innate instincts, but being locked in and giving a shit goes a long way. So, like, I need to see him care and be locked in and bought into a system that Bickerstaff is building. And that goes for all the players. You know, Jaden Ivey, Marcus Sasser had a bit of a defensive reputation. He is a little guy. He struggled in his rookie year. What can he do in year two? How can they build a defense around vets who they know where their defensive deficiencies lie, and they have to scheme around that? So, like, the defensive identity of the team will be very interesting for me, because I do think it is very coach influenced. I mean, you can't make something out of nothing, but if you have some ingredients to work with, and you're a really good coach, and you get buy-in, and you create a system that creates accountability, I think the team could have a much improved defense.
Yeah, for sure. And like you mentioned, JB is a defensive coach. There was, and I mean, he's said this himself, like using Mobley and Allen in Cleveland was a bit due to roster makeup, but all his years, like, defense has been first and foremost. And we know Trajan brought in shooters, and something that JB and Trajan, and I feel like this is just like something coaches say, but to be a good defender, like, you have to want to do it. So I think if we don't, like, if we see someone get pissed about a foul call on the offensive end and not, like, get back on defense or whatever it is, like, I'm hoping, at least because of JB's makeup and just that whole idea of, like, wanting to defend, like, it's not going to happen unless you try to, like, and also couple in just the roster and being more competitive and guys eager to find minutes on the roll. I'm hoping we see a good effort overall. And yeah, preseason just always throws me for a loop because I never know what to take for real and what not to. But like you said, defense is probably an easy thing that you should at least be giving some sort of effort on. Cool.
And to that point, I will say that one thing I wasn't able to read, but I did save, and I will be eager to read once I'm done here. I believe Cody Davis, the new beat writer for the Detroit News, the JB Bickerstaff anti-analytics defense that he's installing. I don't have any conception of what that means, and I'm enthusiastic and terrified to find out.
I did see that as well. I have not read it yet. I'm excited to read it too. And yeah, shout out to Cody, the new Pistons beat writer at the News. So yeah, that's an interesting one. Hopefully it just means, and I'm assuming without reading it, obviously, but hopefully it just means, like, effort. Like, that's what he's expecting, and not like this combination of whatever is plus whatever and advanced analytic you want to take. So I'm just guessing, but yeah, that's going to be a good read as well. All right. Well, Sean, thank you so much for joining. Do you have any closing thoughts before I close us out here? We made it through the off season. There's some kind of real, kind of not real basketball we're going to see. So anything else you wanted to get off your chest before we're done just talking about this team and we actually see them out there?
I think I'll kind of close the way I started, which is, to me, this season is not about wins and losses, and whatever. Think about the number of wins that you think you want the Pistons to achieve this year. Think of a question for each of those prospective wins, because this team is so full of questions. To me, success is answering as many of those questions as possible. So if you want this team to have 36 wins, I can think of 36 existential questions that is plaguing this team that they need to answer. And if they answer all 36 while only winning 22 games, I will consider it a success.
Ooh, that's a good point. Yeah, because I mean, all the conversation about 24 wins, and I mean, you don't want to have a goal of like 24 wins, but yeah, this Trajan said it himself. It's not about wins and losses, which we've all heard before, but it's different. It seems like there's a plan, and hopefully we see that plan enacted. So we can all have something more exciting to go off of and not just hope for the best lottery odds or whatever it might be for years to come. So, Sean, thank you again for joining the show. Appreciate you hopping on, sharing all your insight from Media Day and everything. Reminder to everyone listening live or on the podcast feed, we do have a phone line, so feel free to call the number to ask a question and hear your voice on the show. The number for that is 313-355-2717. And Sean, special thanks to you again for always supporting the show, managing editor over at Detroit Bad Boys. Be sure to check out everything we're posting on the site. We'll have a lot of preseason content coming up. And shout out to all of you guys again for the great questions and talking points tonight. We'll catch you next week, whether on your commute or live with us on YouTube. We can't wait to talk more Detroit basketball with you all.